Hello and welcome to the CNBC-TV18 special conversation here. We're at the US-India Business Council India Ideas Summit with Ambassador Atul Keshap and Martin Schroeter. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Ambassador Keshap, if I can start by asking you, you said that it's never been this good between India and the US. And I want to understand from you, in light of the many developments that have taken place, the steps that have been taken in the last 5 years specifically, why do you believe that's the case today? And what are you most excited about?
Well, Shereen, it's great to see you, and thank you again for all that you do. Look, my sense of this is based on the yardstick of my professional life. And I look back 25 years to where the U.S.-India relationship was then and where it is today. Look at our cooperation on clean tech and green tech. Look at it on semiconductors and supply chain and resilience and security of supply chains. Look at the efforts on fintech, on digital economy. Our two digital economies are the geese that lay the golden eggs for both of our countries. It's a boundless set of opportunities that they pursue. Look at our congruence in the Indo-Pacific. Look at our strategic congruence in the Middle East and with the India-Middle East corridor, Africa, and so much else besides. These zones of collaboration between the U.S. and India are so extensive that I can't even list them all. Outer space, we can go on and on. None of this really existed when I started out working on this 25 years ago. It's not my doing, it's the doing of tens of thousands of well-wishers in both governments, because the collaboration between our two great democracies is natural, it's logical, it's effective, and it's essential.
Natural, logical, effective, and essential. Martin, let me pick up on that in the context of what we are discussing here at the summit, the partnership in an era of AI as well as critical technologies. From a Kyndryl point of view, how do you see this evolving? How do you see it being shaped in light of the priorities in an AI age?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I completely agree with the ambassador on it. It has never been better, and it is a very harmonious sort of relationship, and that's true within Kyndryl today. So what we do here in India is really driving our global growth. Obviously, we have a domestic business here. We work closely with government. We work closely with industry, and we bring the best ideas from around the world that we see. But most importantly, we are innovating and creating new things here in India to help drive our business globally, included in, for instance, as you mentioned, AI. So we have a platform called Kyndryl Bridge that we use to run our business, that we use to deliver services, and that platform is centered around AI. As the largest infrastructure services provider, we have more data than anybody else, so it's logical that we have the best machine learning embedded into our platform. That platform is not only the leading platform in how you deliver service, but it's also built here in India as an example of the kinds of innovation.
Well, speaking of Indian innovation or innovating in India, and you just gave us an example of what Kyndryl is doing here. Growth in India, when the world was flat for Kyndryl, the Indian market for you, the domestic market, was actually growing.
It was indeed, and continues to grow. Look, India for us is one of our 9 biggest countries. I think within a year or two, it is likely to be one of our probably our top 7 countries. So the agenda that the government's following here and the agenda that the industry is following here is one that's supportive of growth, and one that, quite frankly, needs a firm like Kyndryl with the experience we have and the great engineering talent we have. So our capabilities align really well with what the country of India is trying to get done.
Well, speaking of alignment, Ambassador Keshap, let's pick up on each of the pillars that you spoke of, and let's start by talking about AI as well as critical technologies. We do have the ISET in place, and that really has laid the foundation as far as critical technology is concerned. But, you know, what would you like to see as next steps on this issue specifically?
So, thank you, Shereen. USIBC has an artificial intelligence task force that we have created that includes Indian and American companies. And we feel that it is absolutely essential that India and America, the greatest democracies on earth, frame up the rules of the road on artificial intelligence and establish the policy framework that is enabling for innovation, helps protect our citizens against shared enemies, and frankly helps the world become a better place but not a darker place. So getting the rule-making right is critical, including having a light touch so that innovation can occur, and through innovation, job creation. But there's one more thing that I think is very important. we also need to look at women's economic empowerment
Yes.
in India and in America and all around the world. I was just in the green room with you and the governor of Iowa, who's a lady, and Ambassador Geetha Rao Gupta of the State Department, Global Women's Issues Envoy, and Minister Annapurna Devi. And we were talking about what it takes to ensure that women can partake fully in the economic success of our great country. So I think AI is important, women's empowerment equally important.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. We have seen a slight uptick in the labor force participation in the past year, but a lot more needs to be done. But Martin, let's talk about where India positions itself now as a hub for innovation. I mean, we've got global capability centers mushrooming across India. All large tech companies and non-tech companies have also set up their R&D centers here in India, employing Indian talent, building innovative solutions for the world from India. What's your experience been like, and what does that mean potentially in terms of incremental investments and hiring?
Yeah, so we've been, as I mentioned, we've been growing here domestically, and importantly, we've been growing here from an employee base. So for us, as an example, we have about just under 80,000 people globally, and more than a third of them sit here in India. And again, they're focused on not only bringing innovation, for instance, to our platform, but we're doing our creative work for our marketing here. This is the marketing that goes into each of our accounts to identify what's the next best action for that account to take, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, contingent upon all of that is we Kyndryl, we the industry needs to keep creating skills and needs to we need to make sure that the chasm, the gap between the credentialing that exists today and the demand for skills continues to close. We're helping doing that with some skilling initiatives we have where we create the curriculum for universities, and we work with the universities to help to deliver the curriculum so those students come out and they're really ready to be employed. So yes, we're on a great growth path. Yes, I see that continuing, but there are things that each of us needs to do to make sure that we can continue that, and skills sits at the heart of how we could keep the machine going, if you will.
Absolutely. That is going to be a big one to focus on. Speaking of keeping the machine going, Ambassador Keshap, on manufacturing. Now, this is again an area where India is hoping that in the context of supply chain resilience and diversification, that this will be the market that most U.S. investors, most U.S. companies move to or consider and look at. What are you hearing in terms of feedback from U.S. companies at this point in time as they look at this diversification?
Let me tee off of what Martin just said about skilling. It's very important. USIBC companies, Indian and American, are the largest formal sector job creators in this country. And they put enormous effort into recruiting and then upskilling the people of this country for the future prosperity of India. And we're very proud of that track record. We have a wonderful partnership with the government of India and all of the many states, and we look forward to intensifying our efforts in that regard. On manufacturing, I think this is an area of great promise. There's obviously geostrategic tremors that make India a very attractive destination. USIBC companies are very interested, and many of them have been in the forefront of innovation in this area, including Apple and all of the semiconductor companies, Google. Google's doing Pixel in India, and it did it very rapidly. So I think there's a learning curve that's being overcome by the American companies as they look at how they invest in India. Manufacturing is job creation. Manufacturing is prosperity. It's tax payments. It's all kinds of things. And I think people in America are very bullish about it. You know, I've had meetings with all of the U.S. government people who are coming for this summit, flown all the way here, friends of many, many decades. And they all said, if money isn't coming home to America to help America become even more resilient and strong, then it should come to India. Because India is a friend, we trust India, and it's good for America and good for India. So I think there is a learning curve. There are a few pain points that need to be addressed. We're working with the government. That's what we do to sort of constructively offer input and feedback. But India is putting a lot of emphasis into this, and you can see it in the political leadership trying to create an enabling environment. I would go back to my mantras and shlokas, regulatory and tax predictability, ease of doing business, level playing field, and speedy arbitration of disputes. If we can get all those, India is going to have a boom in investment.
The energy transition, and that's an area where India is hoping to draw in big ticket investments. How are you seeing that? Is that an area of collaboration and amplification that you see going forward?
Well, 100%. I was at India Energy Week earlier this year in Goa, where the Prime Minister said, we need every kind of energy, we need it right now, and we need it in giant quantities to ensure the prosperity of India and to see India rise to become a $30 trillion economy. There's no economy in history that has reduced its energy consumption and grown and been prosperous. So we're looking at small modular reactors. We're looking at every kind of renewable technology, air, wind and solar. We're looking at the entire energy ecosystem and to see how our companies can work with India to address its needs. The Indian government is very ambitious on these things, as is the U.S. government, and our companies are ambitious. They truly want to innovate in ways that are good for the people of India and the world. Our companies are leaders in all of the technology in these fields. They have the best in world. Some of their technologies others don't have. And so we want to be willing partners, and we're enthusiastic about the message being sent by the Indian government, especially from the top.
You also spoke about meeting with the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh in the U.S., and there's been a lot that's actually moved on the defense cooperation side, including very recent developments. How do you see this aspect of the relationship developing over the next few years, given the fact that we've seen a fair degree of momentum building up in the last few years?
So interestingly, the policy direction and intent is clear, and it's positive, and two governments just signed the security of supply agreement. Our USIBC companies are the large OEMs, but they're Indian and American. And what's really interesting to me is that in this era of supply chain complication, and we see it in so many of the most advanced parts of our economies, it's essential that the U.S. and India work together to address supply chain issues and reliability of supply, because the great democracies have to have the deterrent capability of showing our enemies what we are capable of so that they think twice. And that's where supply chain, co-development, co-production are absolutely key. India is exporting defense articles to the United States at a rate that is growing logarithmically, and that's because India is a trusted supplier. So I think there's enormous promise in the defense relationship. Our companies play a leading role, and the governments are creating an enabling environment in an area that is extraordinarily highly regulated for obvious reasons, and requires the governments to be handholders as they go.
I just want to pick up on the regulatory framework that Ambassador Keshap was talking about, and where there is an opportunity for India and the U.S. to partner in creating rules in an AI era. How do you see that, Martin?
Yeah, well, the short answer to that is absolutely yes. And if there were one thing that I think we collectively should be working on with regard to the regulatory environments, as we sit here today, I would put trade solidly on that list, but even within trade, it's digital trade. Because of the amount of information in the digital economy and the growth that's ahead of us, we need really good, strong digital trade provisions in order to fuel that growth. In fact, lacking good digital trade provisions, it all comes to a grinding halt. And I'm not talking about personally identifiable information or the information around the citizenry, but when you think about the data that we use, when you think about the data we create, how does that application run on that architecture with that network and that database? That is important data to be able to share. That's how we help our customers get insights. It's how we help optimize systems. We talked very briefly, you just mentioned the transition to energy. We have tools that allow customers to see their carbon footprint. But if you can't exchange any of the data, all of a sudden now you set yourself way back. So yes, the regulatory environment is important. And yes, top of the list for us is strong, forward-thinking digital trade agreements.
Digital trade agreements, a must-have. But let's talk about trade in general. We've got, of course, the elections in the U.S. coming up in November. But post that, whichever administration it is, how important is it going to be to fix some of the pending issues on the trade side?
Easy to ask, very hard to answer. So thank you, Shereen ji. Look, it's very hard to prognosticate about elections. We don't know what will happen, but I think there is a mindset shift that has happened, and we have to recognize it. It is among Democrats and Republicans. Everybody is looking anew at the fundamental, foundational values of free trade, and it's because, frankly, that there have been free riders in this world that have taken advantage of the open architecture of free trade. So what the U.S. and India have to figure out is what we can do to advantage one another, what we can do to fuel the strength and happiness and prosperity of the world's two great pillars of democracy and freedom and prosperity. And in that regard, I think there are things like incremental things that are like mutual recognition standards, digital services agreement. If we do those things that keep the goose laying the golden egg in your country and in ours and help reinforce our bonds, then we're doing the Lord's work. And this is where government, I think, has to rethink the idea of vast, all-encompassing trade agreements and start slicing this thing, slice the banana in a way that actually empowers people. But I would inject a note of caution. Over-regulation kills innovation. Killing innovation kills job creation and wealth creation, tax revenue generation, and frankly, we need to look at how others have done it and not do it that way and ensure our continued prosperity.
So you don't believe an FTA is the need of the hour anytime soon?
I think that an FTA would be an ideal, but you have to accept the reality of politics in the United States. You have to accept how people feel about the last 20 years. Even as our GDP has soared, we're at 28 trillion and climbing, there are great concerns about the dislocation of labor and industries, and now there's this big effort to bring it home, and that's not Democratic or Republican, it's bipartisan. Bring it home, make us prosperous again, renew our heartland, create good jobs. These are feelings the Indian government has as well. So I go back to the point that whatever we work toward, it should be toward our mutual benefit.
Ambassador Keshap, let me ask you, about the comment that you made at the start of this morning's program, where you said that while things have never been as better or as good as they are currently between India and the U.S., there is a lot of online negativity about the relationship, and you believe that that's non-state actors and state actors perhaps furthering that perception and that narrative. But does that narrative impact the thinking in Washington?
So I served in government, and government is always going to be slower than the speed of agit-prop. And government has to be more sober in its responses. And so I look at what the U.S. and Indian governments are saying about each other, and I discount, if not dismiss, a lot of the nonsense that's being generated and manufactured on social media. If you look at our statements, our official statements, things are amazing between the U.S. and India. Look at what our ministers say about one another when they're in public remarks, and look at our actions together, right? To me, an Indian Navy warship in the Straits of Malacca is equivalent to a U.S. Navy warship in the Straits of Malacca. It adds stability, it adds confidence, it ensures freedom of navigation, it shows our solidarity together in upholding the basis, the foundation of civilization and prosperity in this world. That's what matters. Actions speak louder than words, so I'm not worried about it. I also think that, to Martin's great point about long-term planning, all of the companies in this room, the CEOs and the board directors who have flown all the way in, are looking at India long-term. These are for massive investments. What they need, and Martin said it so eloquently, is regulatory and tax predictability, so that they can go to their investment committees and pitch a $10 billion investment in India. They're all ready. India has done a lot to bring itself into the real game. And I think India not only has done so much to get to where it needs to be, but now you're in kind of a foot race with the United States to bring investment dollars in. And I wish India the best of luck. If India and America succeed, the whole world succeeds.
Well, we are here at the India Ideas Summit, so let me end by asking both of you to put an idea on the table that you think both sides need to focus on. You gave us one on the digital trade agreements. Let me ask you for another before we close.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really important work going on here in India, and I think we have to make sure that continues. And that's all about the inclusion approach that both this government, the Indian government, has taken, and our ability, private enterprise's ability to help. So as an example, as we help the government build some of its financial platforms that allow the government to reach further into the economy, That's fabulous. Once the money goes, though, the bad guys show up, and therefore you have to educate the people who are using that technology so they can protect themselves. Those kinds of programs, which we are a big a supporter of and a driver of here, we need to keep that working. So yes, we need countries to work on digital trade agreements, but for in-country work, we need to keep making this a much more inclusive approach, and we, private enterprise, play a role in that and making sure that the education, the skills, lead some of that.
Ek idea.
I always got in trouble in my government service because I'd come up with crazily ambitious ideas. So we're thinking about 2047 and what India looks like at 100 years. Here's a crazy idea. If India is as prosperous as we all hope and pray it will be, and if India is as good a friend of the United States as it already is, how about visa-free travel in both directions between the United States and India? Because the people are the core of our relationship, and they are the genius that propels us forward.
I will vote with my hands and my feet on that one, but that's a great idea to put on the table. Martin and Ambassador Keshap, it's been an absolute pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on the CNBC-TV18 special conversation from the India Ideas Summit. We look forward to hearing more from the two of you, and we wish you the very best of luck with your endeavors and your efforts here in India. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this CNBC-TV18 special from all of us here on the show. For now, many thanks for watching.